Hi, my name's Shannon, and this video is going to be talking about the application of behavior analysis in juvenile delinquency and recidivism. The specific article that was chosen is titled A New View, Behavioral Coaching for Prevention of Delinquency and Recidivism, Implications for Public Policy. This article is written by Trudy Gaines, Leisha Berry, and Joseph Cautilli, and it was published in the Journal of Behavior Analysis in 2008. So before I begin, the term recidivism is just referring to the return to some sort of incarceration. So whether it's a juvenile detention center or prison of some sort as an adult, it's just the return. So anyway, what I really like is the authors set up the introduction by talking about the need for a different type of intervention, because right now the intervention is catch people doing something bad and putting them away, and possibly getting some sort of education classes, and then sending them back out into the world and tell them, you better not do it again or you're going to go back. And they also talk about how this clearly is not working because of how high recidivism rates are. So they specifically go into the very frequently used the classes. So you may know of someone who's gotten a DUI or gotten in trouble. You know, they're a minor and they've gotten caught with maybe marijuana, and instead of getting in trouble because maybe it's their first offense and they've been a pretty stellar person before this, the judge tells them, okay, you just need to take this class and then you're fine as long as you never do this again. So, there have been studies that have proven that these classes are very ineffective for a plethora of reasons that the authors do go into. But essentially that, you know, these drug education, sex education courses are not stopping the problem. They're not preventing the problem. I know when I was young we had DARE, and DARE is, you know, when I was a community health practitioner, you know, that's one of the biggest fails of all time, that entire system. So what it comes down to, though, from a behavior analyst point of view, is that the stimulus control is higher and stronger for reinforcement of peers than for, and like the approval given or provided by from those peers than the rule-governed behavior, right? So these people, children, because this article is talking about juveniles, learn all these rules, right? All the reasons why they should never smoke again, or all the reasons why they should never do X, Y, and Z again, steal, whatever it is that our society says is wrong. But that stimulus control is not strong enough to overcome the reinforcement provided by social support, by impulse controls, because this article also talks about how until a person is 25 years old, they really don't have fully developed impulse control yet. Another thing that this article addresses is the high frequency of children with disabilities, specifically ADHD, in juvenile detention centers. And ADHD, that kind of makes sense because they have even further diminished impulse controls. So, you know, self-regulation issues and so forth. So if that's what's causing these poor decision-making skills, paired with the reinforcement from peers, and maybe even the lack of punishment from parents, you know, this just supports an entire setting for this behavior to continue. So, what the authors recommend is an intervention called behavioral coaching. So, behavioral coaching is kind of like a whole person comprehensive intervention where it looks at the setting, the people, and the individual person that they're trying to improve on these desired behaviors. And what the authors say is the reason why they like behavioral coaching so much is because behavioral coaching focuses on increasing the frequency of these desired behaviors and creating an environment that will not only support these desired behaviors, but will also not support those bad behaviors. Maybe it's drug use or stealing or whatever it may be, whatever those bad behaviors are, this new behavioral coaching environment will not support those. So what this means is training parents to be behavioral coaches, or whoever these stakeholders, that's a term that these authors use a lot, are the stakeholders in the child's life. So if that's a foster parent, teachers, coaches, whoever it may be who that child looks up to, it's up to them to step up and be a role model, but also help foster these good behaviors and decrease the opportunities for these bad behaviors to take place. So increase supervision time, decrease unsupervised peer time, especially if those peers are the people who are providing that social reinforcement for those bad behaviors. So another great thing about this study, or this paper, is talking about how there have been many meta-analytic studies that support this application of behavior analysis for juvenile delinquency. And that's fantastic, because if you don't know, meta-analytic studies are of the highest internal validity, because that is when researchers take data from a bunch of different people looking at the same situation, the same dependent and independent variables, who all have possibly, hopefully, come up with the same functional control, or have proven functional control between certain dependent and independent variables. So if these meta-analytic studies show us a statistical significance between these two or maybe multiple events, that's great, because that means it's believable, where, as you probably know, just one study or maybe just even 5 studies saying something does not prove anything. It has to be a whole group of people saying the same thing across many different settings to show generalizability or generality, and strength of those results. So the authors also say that for this behavioral coaching to be successful, there should be a risk assessment done to because instead of behavioral coaching just being a reactionary intervention, they want it to be a proactive or a preventative intervention. So doing these risk assessments to figure out, okay, who are these children who are possibly going to end up making these bad choices or presenting these bad behaviors. And if we identify them first, we can more quickly intervene. And then, they provide their thoughts, further citing different studies supporting how behavioral coaching has worked in other scenarios. And so a bulk of this paper is talking about how great behavioral coaching is and how effective it is for increasing the desired frequency of desired behaviors, because it identifies those strength areas and just increases the frequency of those behaviors instead of focusing on punishing those bad behaviors. So the authors finished this article by calling it the behavior analytic view. And they talk about how you first identify the stakeholders, right? The people who know this individual is best. This is how you kind of get the background information, figure out what the reinforcers might be. And then after that, you conduct your FBA, your functional behavior assessment. After that, the targeted behaviors are identified, and then you determine which are the desired behaviors and which are the behaviors that are the problem behaviors. And then after that, you use that information to develop your intervention. So if you realize that, the problem behavior is drug use, and you realize that a certain group of friends are also drug users and support that individual's drug use, this would be, that would impact your intervention, because you would focus less on social support and more on training parents and increasing parental supervision. But if parents are the drug users and supplying the drugs to the children or to the child, then maybe you want to identify outside stakeholders, maybe a coach, an older sibling, someone who is not exhibiting those behaviors, but someone who still has a bond, a healthy bond with that child, to be their coach, to model for them, and to support those good behaviors. So, like I said, this is behavioral coaching is a comprehensive intervention, and it involves setting, it involves the people in the child's life, and it involves activities. So it really is an all-encompassing intervention. The authors do say that this, in a short-term model, is more expensive of an approach than the current model of having these group education classes, but the long-term returns for doing these individual interventions is much more beneficial than these ineffective classes in recidivism. So what I don't love about this article is that it says that all these studies support behavioral coaching, but it doesn't really talk about how those studies determined that. How did they determine that behavioral coaching is an effective tool? Other than giving vague guidelines of, oh, you need to identify stakeholders, then you need to perform an FBA, and then you need to start your intervention. It really doesn't give you any further guidelines than that, and I think that maybe they had like a page gap or cap or something like that, because I think that would have been really useful in this article to talk about maybe an example of what a behavioral coaching intervention may look like. Again, with the statement of it's an individualized intervention, so this is just one single example, but I think that would have made the article stronger. Overall, I really like how they made behavioral analytic terms super layman, and I like that they talked about generalization and maintenance and transition planning. Those are all really important tools or really important aspects to a successful intervention. So I think they did a really good job of that. But overall, this is a really interesting article, and like I said, that it was written by Trudy Gaines, Leisha Berry, and Joseph Cotilli, and is in the Journal of Behavior Analysis. And they even at the end give recommendations for people who, policymakers. So that's probably also one of the other things I really like best about this article. Anyway, I hope you learned something new and that you like this article as much as I did, because I thought it was a really interesting point of view about marrying behavior analytics with juvenile delinquency and recidivism. Have a great day and see you next time.